pretty well. But you're okay.
Connected. Make sure all the microphones are off.
I have the same one.
That one keeps popping up.
Yep.
Was it really? Going?
Right.
All right. Where is it?
You're loving that. No, you're okay.
My mic break.
Okay. Okay, it's 5:30. We'll call this meeting of the regular Public Works meeting, Public Works and Highway Committee to order. Attendance shows our committee members are all here with the exception of Phil Hudson, who said he would be joining us about 10 to 15 minutes late. I will entertain approval of the minutes from April 10th.
Motion to approve? I'll second.
Any changes or comments on the minutes? We'll vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. So unanimous. Moving on to public comment. Amazingly, I don't see anybody here tonight. So I guess we won't have any public comment. New business, Tower 4 containment change order, McGuire Iron Inc.
All right, so this change order is a result of the Tower 4 project being delayed for a couple of years. When the project was first scoped, we didn't need to have containment around the tower because there weren't facilities around the tower that needed that protection. Now we have construction of the well house and the neighboring building that's also been built, so the containment is just to protect from overspray when they're painting the tower. And that's the $40,000 cost that we're looking to get approved today.
Okay, so now because we need containment because the project's far enough along, is that what I'm understanding? Or
Well, it is advancing now, but, so, you know, they'll be assembling the tower and then eventually painting it. But the need arose because back 2 years ago, when this was first underway, there weren't neighboring facilities.
Yeah, there's buildings to protect now.
Nearby buildings to protect, from overspray.
Okay, committee? Go ahead. Ron.
So why was it delayed 2 years?
Well, I think there's a long story on that.
Sorry.
And it, you know, to the best of my knowledge, there was another analysis done that looked at the height of the tower. So they actually increased the height of the tower for the high pressure area. In addition, there were some concerns for residents that lived to the north of that location. So some monitoring was put in place to watch the level on their wells.
This is the one we were
Those
talking.
issues were sorted out, then we were able to proceed with,
We were talking about this one at the utility advisory, weren't we?
yeah, a little bit.
Talking about the height, or we were explaining, Paula was explaining high pressure versus low pressure, I believe.
Yeah, the tower is serving the
That.
high pressure area.
Okay.
So they increased the height of the tower, but then they're also attempting to address the resident concerns in the area.
Yeah. But containment isn't required because of the height of the structure. It's the abutting buildings.
It's the neighboring facilities that weren't there when this contract was originally conceived.
Okay.
Yeah.
I read through the letter. It seemed like they're really trying to work with us on that, keeping it on the lower end of, they said their estimate was.
Yep.
Oh. I'd make a motion to approve it.
I'll second.
Any more comments? Rick, anything? We'll vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Village building alarm monitoring.
Okay, with this item, we had $25,000 budgeted this year to address alarm monitoring equipment throughout our buildings. It's brought about because of the police department transition over to Washington County. Previously, alarms were monitored in dispatch there via the radio system and connectivity to these panels to dispatch. So because we're losing that, we're getting these proposals for alarm monitoring. We went out and got 3 quotes, as you can see in the write-up. One was from O&W for an original cost of about $12,000, Getzky and Associates for about $10,000, and then Johnson Controls for $53,000. So we kind of threw Johnson Controls out right away because they're outrageously high compared to the others. And then we looked at the technology involved with O&W and with Getske. Getske was offering a radio solution, and we think the more modern and appropriate approach is to use an internet connected like LAN connection and cellular connection where those aren't available. So O&W was the only one offering that. So we kind of expanded the project and looked at adding panels to the fire station, which also wasn't originally part of the project, but does fit within the budget. Adding some outsourced labor to run the cables that are necessary for the alarm panels. Because originally the village had considered doing that ourselves, but because of just other demands on the workforce, we think it's better to outsource that now. So that's where the project grew to that expanded project number of 17,260. And it's also worth noting that O&W Communications is doing other work in the village. They're providing the security system in the new DPW building. And we're considering working with them in Village Hall and potentially other buildings throughout the village. So having some standardization on systems and using one provider, I think is something that's pretty worthwhile. And there's some features with the system. When they did their initial investigation, Scott, as well as Chief Snow and Chief Delane, really liked the flexibility and some of the features. So I think it's worthwhile, even though it does come in, the original cost above Getske. We feel like it's the best solution for the village. And really, when we're looking at the type of technology that we want to implement, it's the only one that really meets the requirements.
Minnie,
Make a motion to approve the contract to O&W Communications not to exceed 19,000.
Second.
So a couple questions, Matt. First off is there any issue with the expanded project? It's an additional $5,000 from the original bid documents that went out. Normally, I honestly, is that common? I mean, have we done that before?
Done, like asked for.
Well, like you did original bid, right? And that was the bid that was let and received quotes for it. Now we're adding on $5,000 to a bid that was sent out. It doesn't have to be rebid?
No, it doesn't have to be rebid. I mean, it's up to you to award it or not. But there's nothing requiring us to rebid it. And we felt like for some of the reasons that I outlined that it would make sense just to continue down the path with O&W, one, because of the technology, and then two, kind of compatibility with everything else going on in the village and some of the features there.
Yeah, both of those make sense, the technology and the compatibility, and since they're doing the public works building, I get it.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Then think about, this is a fallout though from having the dispatch move. And it's
Yeah.
gonna have a recurring cost of roughly $5,000
Correct.
per year to.
Yeah, there's a recurring cost with this. And I was going to put it in my director's report, but I didn't. I'll probably include it in a future director's report. There's another cost that Public Works is going to have associated with the move of dispatch to Washington County, and that's answering our calls after hours. That's currently done by police dispatch. So we're going to be having another contract, which is actually below the threshold where you would even have to award it. It's at Steve's approval level. But we'll be hiring an answering service to deal with our after hours emergency.
I see.
is that definitive? We're definitely going to hire somebody for that? Because I remember when we had all the dispatch conversations, so much was still up in the air on all of that. And I think what we need is an update on what's going on with the dispatch. I think that would be not necessarily here, but at village board level. I would like to have that.
There may be more costs as well that.
Yeah,
are-
it's been a year, practically, well, not that long, 9 months since we talked about it.
Just here is something we didn't know about.
Yeah. I mean, and how does an answering service take care of emergency calls in the night?
Well, we give them sort of a set of criteria on who to call for what set of circumstances. And they just kind of go through the matrix that we provide to end up with the right person.
Like if a pipe breaks, it's like we do X, Y. I remember having this discussion, but we hadn't settled on a solution. So that's the best solution is what you're saying.
Yeah, so the company is actually called Answering Innovations, and they're working with a couple other communities, I believe West Bend and Slinger, Hartford.
With good results so far? Yeah. I mean, how many things can go wrong? Usually it's like telephone pole came down on blank, somebody hit a hydrant, pipe broke. I mean, that's got to be like 90% of
Yeah,
them
so I mean,
probably.
Really what it amounts to is, are they going to be calling Scott's Group for, something on the streets or the roads? Are they going to be calling Tim for a wastewater sewer issue? Or are they calling Paul and his group, I should say, not him directly?
Mhm.
Okay, I gotta ask. So when our residents get this individual, will they be able to understand this individual? Are these calls going overseas?
Yeah,
They're located in Wisconsin.
Okay, so we got that Wisconsin accent thing.
Yep. They sound a lot like me.
Um,
A little off topic.
O&W makes sense for the reasons you mentioned, the consistency. It's the later technology, right, Rick? The internet and
Yeah, versus radio, there was a time where you couldn't even have cell
Let's-
services backup, and now that's, pretty much the norm. But yeah, having it connected through internet is the best option.
the other question I had, it sounds like at some point, all of our buildings will be protected by O&W. Is that the goal or are we there or what's?
We're not there now. I think Village Hall is the next big one that's being considered, and then we'll have to go from there. The water utility is also looking at O&W for systems on their towers and booster stations and so on.
Hope we get like a volume discount at some point.
Yeah, I've got a decent amount of experience in security and security systems, and I was very pleasantly surprised by the pricing that they're providing compared to some of the companies that I've worked with in the past. So I think we're already getting a pretty good deal. I shouldn't say that too loud, I guess, but but yeah, I mean, we would certainly look for, that type of arrangement if we did add on to the system. And a lot of like the systems and software, the bigger they get, the licensing agreement can change and more devices on a system could result in overall like per device savings. You still pay more because there's more devices.
Okay.
we have a motion and we have a second.
We
Any
do.
more comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Next, we have C, authorization to purchase mainline sewer television truck.
Okay, so this is a budgeted replacement of the current televising truck that is from 2001. So this is a 23-year-old piece of equipment that we're replacing. It did go through a camera and equipment upgrade in 2013, keeping the chassis in place. But now we're to the end of the life on the existing equipment, so we're requesting to replace the camera equipment as well as the chassis. The pricing that we received was, I get to the right item here. Using the Sourcewell, which is a national cooperative purchasing agency, we'd be able to get 351,000 roughly for the purchase of the truck using Envirotech equipment out of Lannon. We had two options available. One was for a new truck for approximately $339,000. And then they had a demo truck for $327,000, actually almost $328,000 that we could get. That truck has less than 5,000 miles on it. It's in great shape, and we would still get the full warranty for the chassis as well as the camera equipment. So based on that, we're requesting that you approve the purchase of that demo truck in the amount of $328,000.
And I'm probably just not seeing it here. What year are these trucks? These brand new ones?
24? Yeah, Tim said yes, 24.
How do you get 5,000 miles on a 24 when it's this kind of truck? Where were they driving it?
Well, it is a demo truck, so it's probably going around to various.
Oh, I see. They're
counties.
taking it around to counties. Okay. And this is out of our, I see it's been budgeted out of the capital budget for wastewater.
Yep. So
That's in the budget. Okay. Committee?
Make a motion to approve the purchase of purchase of the truck from Envirotech Equipment not to exceed 327,964.
Second, I had a question.
So do I.
Bob?
Who's first?
Bob?
3 questions, actually. I'm sure Tim has heard this through the years, and this is a big chunk of change, this piece of equipment. You bring Tim up, come on.
He's happy to come up.
Yeah. Maybe it was stated, are we getting a pretty good trade-in for the old vehicle?
Actually, not a trade-in for the old vehicle. The 327,000 does include a $10,000 credit for the old camera equipment that they would use for like replacement parts, essentially.
So we could reuse the camera stuff. Okay. Next question is, can we share this with other communities?
It's been my experience in communities that do that, that when you need it, it's never there. And in my opinion, this is the number 3 most important piece of equipment the sewer utility has. Number 1 being my personnel, number 2 being the combination sewer cleaner, number 3 being a mainline televisor.
Do all of our abutting communities have these? Do the abutting communities have this? Not that that's,
Omni Falls has it. Mequon has a shared unit with Glendale and Brown Deer. Jackson does not have a mainline camera system.
okay, so they use like Visu Sewer or something like that?
Yep, and it's getting harder and harder and harder to get them under contract because there are just fewer and fewer people to do this kind of work.
And a lot of times, well, not a lot, but sometimes it's an emergency, right? And you need it immediately. Last question, I may be way off base with this. Can we share this with the water department for looking at wells and any of their infrastructure?
I don't really think you want to be putting
I understand it's potable versus
well, but we
with
do,
proper sanitation.
significant amount of storm sewer investigation.
Okay.
Engineering. Prior to road reconstruction, we look at that infrastructure to see if the storm system needs to be upgraded as well as the road.
Okay, so it's storm and sanitary. All right, thanks, Tim.
Actually, you answered all the questions I had, so I'm fine.
Have a motion?
Yeah, I made the motion.
Any other comments, questions? Both, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Moving on to, always a hot topic,
Yeah.
the yard waste facility and identifying village residents.
All right, I'll start it off and Tim can stay up here just in case there's any other questions. But this is kind of 2 topics wrapped up into one. We need to set a move date for yard waste to start collecting at the new DPW. And just based on how things work, we kind of need the leaves in order to make this fall, the leaves this fall, in order to get the right mix at the current site. So you want to continue to collect there through this fall and really begin collecting at the new DPW come January 25. And then in combination with that, you know, there's a really high volume of cars and it's really difficult for staff to inspect driver's licenses for up to 350 cars, like it says in the write-up here. So we're looking for your opinion on establishing an ID system where folks would come to Village Hall, we would look at their ID there, and we would issue like a window cling that they would put in their car, and we would be able to identify that quickly just by looking at the windshield and kind of get people through. We're not proposing a fee, but it would be like an every other year sort of process to kind of recheck and get a new permit in your vehicle. The other thing is that neighboring communities are all charging fees. So we feel that especially now that the new facility is located very close to Mequon,
Mhm.
that people might, kind of come in and try to use the facility for free because theirs isn't. So having a way for our citizens to access quickly and not take on the cost potentially from the nearby communities, we think this is an appropriate step, and I guess we'd be happy to talk about it right now.
Mhm. Do you have a preference, Tim, as to what you would like to see?
I prefer the windshield cling. And the reason for it is if we start handing out mirror hangers, like, like a handicap thing, they're very easy to hand off to somebody in
Right.
the neighboring community that you might be friends with who just did a bunch of buckthorn eradication or something like that. If you look in the examples, this one here is the city of West Bend. It's a windshield cling. It's an annual pass.
So it's up on the screen here too.
Mhm.
And then there was one from Richfield.
There's Richfield.
If you can scroll down, Richfield uses the mirror pipe.
You're
And the other, the hanger.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other stuff submitted was just the city of Mequon. I highlighted their language here. So there again, they do charge a fee. We're not proposing to charge a fee by any means. But what I was trying to point out is every surrounding community has the process where you come to Village Hall, you fill out an application, we give you the sticker or the mirror hanger, and there's a record of you, your vehicle, and your document that you have in your vehicle for identification purposes.
Okay.
All meshes together.
I think personally, I think the cling for the windshield makes sense. And I don't know how often you guys use the recycling center, but I usually am there every couple of weeks. And boy, have those lines gotten long. You will wait in line for a spot in there, and you can't convince me that they're all from Germantown, because they're going to get black dirt, they're going to get mulch, they're dropping off stuff. And once somebody finds out that you can get this for free here, well, of course, it's going to really be a problem for our residents. And we want to make things as smooth as possible for our residents. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a colorful window cling that he can see in a glance. Date in a bright color and let it happen.
But Terry,
Ready?
the bottleneck isn't the looking at the ID or the cling or whatever. It's just loading topsoil or whatever, right?
No, it's both.
It can be both, yeah.
It can be both. It never used to be both, like even 2 years ago. And the last, I think this season in particular, but last year as well, maybe there's just a lot more stuff to be brought in. But the lines actually go down the street. It's been incredibly busy, and it's both.
So maybe no system we pick for the ID is going to work because of that, but,
If it eliminates people that don't belong there, it will.
well, that it'll work. But as
point
far
of
as the backlog, I thought the backlog was to have a quicker system to get people through.
No, to identify, make sure no other people are.
My opinion is to use an existing system that's already in place, and that's this.
Don't have time for it.
Residents,
Let me finish, okay, all right. I had the privilege of using the city of Franklin's facility over the weekend. They use this, and all they do, they drive in, they show them the back of their card, and this guy has a little, it's a scanner or something. He just scans it, says, okay, you're good. That's it. Nothing stuck on the window to lose, nothing to transfer to somebody else illegally. It's just here, it's always in your pocket. So I'd like us to look into something like that.
Go ahead.
So Bob, I apologize. So you're using Franklin with a Germantown ID. So
No.
they're obviously not checking where you live.
I was with a friend.
Ah,
Who
okay.
lives in-
So it wasn't your ID.
That's a good
Okay.
clarification.
All right, thank you.
I personally think that the driver's license doesn't work as well. They all look alike. you know how small the address is on a driver's license. And the retired gentlemen that are at the gate are gonna be, okay, hold on, let me get my, yeah, it will. It's gonna slow everything down even more.
Visually, it's a device.
It's a
that
scanner,
reads Your,
yeah.
your code.
How much does that cost?
I don't know. I'm saying we
Yeah.
should look into it. It's just a handheld.
Okay.
device.
Now, hopefully we don't lose. Go ahead.
So we have a couple challenges here. First, certainly we are getting traffic from outside of the village of Germantown. There is no doubt to that. Additionally, we're getting commercial traffic in there too, right? All of that is not residents dropping stuff off. It may be residents that have a landscaping company, for example. So what is our end goal to only have residents use this? That's going to be my first question. Is that what we're trying to do?
Hope so.
Yes.
The end goal has always been for Germantown residents only.
Only.
Village board banned commercial use.
I understand that, but yes, but yeah.
But here again, you can have a commercial guy who lives in Germantown, who has a Germantown ID, and he's coming in with his dump trailer filled with 20 trees saying, this is all from my property. And how are the gate attendants supposed to know whether it is or it isn't? Whereas if they came to Village Hall and had an ID in the vehicle, it's already been vetted that they're a resident and that this license plate lines up with this property.
Because of a window cling
Right, because the vetting will be done.
here,
That's good.
at here, yeah. And so, and I want to be careful. I'm not suggesting this, but to go to any type of window cling or hanger or scanner, there is additional cost for the village.
Yeah, I mean, the
Let's
the
let-
clings are relatively inexpensive, and I mean, I'm guessing just
But
based.
you have staff time now.
Correct, that was my next point.
You have
We'll
staff.
take time from staff at Village Hall to, to check all these IDs.
And has anybody done the follow-up? Do we have the staff time at Village Hall to process these?
I
Because
think we would,
there will be thousands of them, especially if they are free. So I have 2 cars. I will get one for each car.
yeah, I think that's why we're looking to get this approved as far enough ahead of time as possible. So we're not, trying to implement in December and then getting crushed with those thousands of people all at once. If we can get approval and implement the system, and then take people at a slower pace over the course of this year, I think it'll be more manageable. But I think, our opinion is that, that it's important enough to identify people, that it's worth that effort.
I also think that not everybody uses the recycling center. There are lots of houses that have very small yards, and they don't really use it that much. It's like people like me who have big yards with lots of stuff to chop down, and we're there a lot more frequently, or like you, Rick. But I think I'm still netting out on the window cling, and you can obviously advertise it, come to Village Hall, or maybe we have to streamline the process of how they get that sticker, or make it easier to get in various locations. And I don't know what all those locations might be. I dare say the library could potentially be one. But Village Hall or some village police station, Village Hall, library. But again, it's the ID and then they get their sticker.
Goal tonight is to try to narrow down what we want to do so that we can come in next meeting with some samples, maybe some
Costs.
processes,
Rick?
costs in place.
Yeah, I got a couple comments here.
I would caution having these things available at the police department, because we are losing dispatch, and police department is going to be
Yeah.
staffed basically the same hours as Village Hall going forward, with clerical staff. My goal would be to have this figured out by the time the fall water bills come out, so it can be advertised, this is what's coming, and then have these materials available during tax season when a large volume of residents are coming through Village Hall, and they could pay their taxes at the treasurer's window and then come down by Public Works and get their decal or whatever at the same time they're here paying their taxes. That would be goal.
Sounds very organized. Rick?
Yeah, a few comments. Bob, as much as I like technology, I don't want to manage a scanner at the location. I've had many instances with scanners and they break a lot. And again, it's another piece of equipment that you have to maintain, where this is an analog system that, you know, you can put a cling on your window. It's not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction, I think. The other thing I wanted to mention is what Phil alluded to, and that's not on the agenda tonight, but I think we do have to have a discussion if we want to do a stipend or some type of payment on this to cover some of these costs. I like the window cling better than the hanger, just for the simple fact that it is more difficult. And when you say window cling, it's like an oil change window cling, is that right?
Yeah, it'd be a little
Exactly,
bigger,
yeah.
probably.
Plastic, so it can still be moved, but hopefully not.
Yeah, it kind of loses its effectiveness after.
It does.
so
It,
many-
it starts losing its grip if you move it too often. So I would vote for that.
And one more comment on the cling. They're not expensive, I don't think. I mean, if you could come back with costs on this, I think that would be a nice element. As I too am opposed, as are many, many residents, to charging any fee for the recycling center. And I don't want to go through that again. Do you remember that from a few years ago?
Well, I remembered for the burn permits, and I think we did it for the recycle center too, and
Yeah, big
we've
feedback.
had this discussion before, yes.
Yeah, I think the cling sounds inexpensive enough. And look, we tried for a year or two. And if it's not working, or if there's no change, well, we're not out a whole bunch of money. You know, we can switch it up and do something different. So I think it's at least a start. Try something.
Yeah, it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly.
We're certainly open to entertaining, different methods if it doesn't work.
I'd still be interested in at least making some phone calls. Franklin,
I will reach out to Franklin.
just to see what the scanner is, what's their experience, what is the cost of it, you know, just to do it to do
Due
justice.
diligence, yeah.
The other thing we struck with in Germantown is we have Germantown residents that live in Colgate. We got Germantown residents that live in Richfield. They're all part of Germantown corporate, and we also have the town of Germantown. So unless you issue, and I don't know how you do that with a scanner. I mean, I suppose everybody that lives in the city of Franklin lives in the city of Franklin. But here we got these really weird political boundaries where people over on Goldendale Road have a Richfield zip code.
But you're gonna be vetting that the same way when you're using stickers or whatever.
Right, but we can tie it back to the GIS system in-house.
And yeah, I mean, the other thing there is we'd have a little more time at Village Hall to assess that than, potentially holding up a line if it were to become an issue.
Well, and I find the scanner thing a little intriguing. So what were they scanning? So were they scanning a database of where the person lives, or were they scanning a database of the 4,000 people that paid $10 a piece, simply zapping the driver's license saying, yeah, this person paid, he can go? So what were they scanning? I mean, I know they were scanning the barcode on the back of the driver's license, but did that link back to some permit database somewhere that?
That's where maybe we can get some questions.
Yeah.
See how hard or
My guess is
complicated it
that it ties back to an address. The
That's what I
entire,
guess.
the entire database of addresses for the municipality.
Maybe there's some that are
And they
out.
scan it and they go, good.
Yeah, that's how quick it was. And maybe there's some that are on the fringes or not technically in the boundaries, but oh well, we've got 99% of them covered.
So we can look into that a little bit, and we'll get some costs on the clings. The other thing that just occurred to me about the scanner too, and I'm not certain with the new DPW facility, is if there's going to be network connectivity out in the guard shack, because I'm guessing that device does need to connect.
There will be Wi-Fi availability.
There will be out there? Okay.
So this is for information only, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so any other comments?
Can we call these Klingons then, or?
Sure, call 'em anything you want, Bob. And I hope they scan, if we do scanners, I hope it's better than when I go to Fleet Farm. Like, huh, hold it like this, hold it like that. Oh, let me try one more time.
Yeah, scanners are pretty good now, no matter what you do, too.
Okay,
Yeah, well.
well, thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Dan.
Moving on to discussion of proposed update to the sanitary sewer service area.
So this is an item that was first looked at a couple weeks ago by the Utility Advisory Committee, and is now coming to your attention. They didn't make any, they didn't have any feedback other than to pass it on to you. They recommended the map as it was. But there are a few things that we want to talk about. So it's coming about because the existing sanitary sewer service area is one of the oldest in place with sewer pack, and that prompted them to really push us in the direction of getting this updated. And then in addition to our existing plan being one of the oldest, the process for amending existing agreements is also substantially longer than it used to be. And it can take up to a year to get approved for kind of like a parcel by parcel or development by development addition, which has been the village's approach generally for the last 15 or 20 years. So with this update and trying to prevent a lot of those one-off additions to the sanitary sewer service area, they would like us to take a look at the area in like a 10 to 15-year projection of what we think could be served in that amount of time. So the item or the exhibit that we have on here represents an effort that staff undertook to identify some new areas for coverage under the sanitary sewer service area. And we kind of looked at 4 or so different things. One was, and probably the biggest one was, how did it align with the 2050 comprehensive plan for land use? The second item is who currently owns the property and is it likely to change hands and be developed? The next is feasibility, like is the area very serviceable at a relatively low cost with sewer? And then the last one is, are there existing sanitary systems, non-public private systems that are serving properties? And if there were like septic systems serving properties and they're relatively new, then we weren't looking to add those areas into the sanitary sewer service area. So the map, which I'm just putting up here, represents the staff's first effort at expanding and in some cases reducing the area. So when you're looking at this map that's up on the screen now, the like hatched red area are proposed additions, and then the hatched blue area areas. Can you see my cursor on the screen or not really?
Yes.
Is it up there? Okay.
Yep.
So right here is an area that we're proposing to be removed, and then here's another removal. And then the red are a little easier to see, but those are the additions. The one area that we wanted to bring to your attention was this kind of space right here. This is an area, it's Isabel Farms, and they're all served by private systems. So our first recommendation here is not to include them in the area, but this is an approach to having these like holes or gaps is what the DNR refers to this as, is generally frowned upon. So they would like us, and they is like sewer pack working, kind of knowing the DNR's opinion on these matters, because ultimately it will have to go to DNR. They would like us to either fill in the area. So yeah, either fill
Yeah.
in this area, or we could make some kind of property by property modifications, smaller modifications to make this more of a contiguous thing, or even potentially remove this area from the map entirely, so you have a solid block here and not this kind of hole. But I think what we're recommending is, and would like to get your feedback on, is proceeding with getting a preliminary opinion from the DNR, which is a process that could take up to a month, but we're not really in a big hurry to get this done. There's no like pending development that, you know, we're under the gun for and need this expansion. So we'd like to get a preliminary opinion on, you know, on this area right here, and whether or not they would down the road, when formally submitted, approve this as it is, and see if that goes through. So that's one item is, do you generally agree with that approach? And then is there anything else on the map that you see that you'd like to discuss or potentially modify or not?
I actually have a couple questions. So Isabel Farms, a little island there, if that becomes part of the sanitary sewer district, what does that mean for them, short-term and long-term?
Yeah, it doesn't really mean anything, but the more area that is covered by the sanitary sewer service area, there's essentially fees that go along with it that the village has to pay.
So we pay more if we add more? Okay,
So that's why, I mean, I think we took a pretty reasonable approach in not adding a whole bunch of area. I mean, we didn't color the whole map in, you know, as an example, because we don't want those fees. And that's another reason, because this is so unlikely to be served by sewer because of the existing septic and the age of that development, that in the next 10 to 15 years, it's very unlikely that it would be. So we think, let's leave it off, let's avoid the fees, and try to get that through.
and another question based on one of the comments we did get from Woodside Acres residents, because the sanitary sewer district might encompass, does it encompass any part of Woodside?
No, it goes up to, so that's up here in the north. It's basically just approaching them on the south side of that.
This resident's fear was that if we get that close or we incorporate them, they're going to have to, at some point, get onto water and sewer.
Yeah, I read the comment, and there's nothing now, there's no desire, I believe, from the board or staff to compel people to connect. I think the comment stated that, you know, she would like written reassurance, and I don't know that that's possible because, you know, a different board at a different time could change their mind on the matter. But there's no requirement that you hook up, and the village would not be compelling people to do so.
Okay, sometimes I think part of the breakdown in understanding is maybe some residents think we are doing this because we have all this development planned, where in fact it's really being driven more by MMSD, asking us to update this. Is that correct?
Sewer pack and the.
Sewer
and the
pack,
DNR,
yeah.
Yep. But it does, so the red hatched areas would be in the sanitary sewer service area, and then could, without this additional step of approvals, surely like any new development would have to go through all the typical approvals. But this is just one less than, I guess, that it would have to go through. We're going through this process to identify a larger addition to the area than has been done in the past.
Okay, I guess my next question is for Bob, Utility Advisory Committee, you being the chair. Was this pretty smooth sailing to get this map approved through them? And everybody, was it unanimous or?
It was unanimous, but there were some pretty good comments, and some of the board members, they expressed concern for the residents, because anytime you put a line on a plan, all of a sudden it seems permanent. So you see the line now, but you don't hear the explanation. So that's where outreach would be important on this, to try to assuage the fears of some of these residents, that this does not mean that it's going to be sewered and watered. There was some other little tweaking that we talked about in the committee meeting, Matt, those little peninsulas that come down. You see where it says Town of Germantown?
Right up here.
Yep, yep, and those two, now you go to the left, I'm sorry, the Town of
Right here.
yeah, those two. Weren't you going to try to either talk to Sewer Pack about them, or you were going,
These are proposed additions, so
Itty bitty ones.
yeah.
yeah,
You had an explanation for them that there's no way I shouldn't say no way, but it's unlikely that you'd sewer wasn't it two properties, I thought?
if I remember.
Tim knows.
Yeah,
Because this came up during the discussion, and my understanding was Matt was going to do some follow-up with that.
So those little fingers that drop down.
Yeah. Yeah,
Some point they're solid.
That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, and if we say we didn't add those, but added the rest of the red area to the north of there, then we would have another hole in the map, which is potentially another problem for DNR approval.
so those, it's hard to see, but the crosshatch also carries into those fingers?
It does, yeah.
Okay,
And the reason being is that sanitary is proposed to go down Rockfield Road where the creek is. So those parcels would have sewer adjacent to them, so they'd have the ability to hook up in the future.
okay.
But not to be forced to hook up, correct? As long as their septic system is fine, they're good. Okay.
We've never forced anybody to hook up to our sanitary sewers, have we?
The only place that I'm aware of since I've been here is, Side Meadows. When their septic's failed.
Mhm. I
Okay.
remember that.
Freeway and hook up.
Does DNR get involved then if their septic's failing? I mean, from a health reason, they say, well,
That was a DNR decree executed through Washington County.
okay. Feel better with that than us saying, nope, you gotta do it. I don't think we talked about this, Matt, but thanks, Tim. One other thing. So we've got these boxes there that are, we've excluded, all right, for your reasons and that. Because you're within I could see if I was surrounded in a box like that, that the likelihood of me getting whatever from any side is a lot more likely to happen. Not the case here. It doesn't work that way, right? You've got the criteria that excluded those areas, those boxes and whatever, and
Yeah, Tim, maybe you could explain the
farm ones.
reasoning behind the two exclusion areas?
Okay, so the two exclusion areas, you still hear me if I talk?
Sure.
yep,
Okay, so this is Isabel Farms. This is an existing subdivision that ties into Isabel Farms. Isabel Farms, if I recall correctly, are all 5 acre and larger lots. So if your system that you currently have fails, chances are you have ample amount of land to put in a second system. So if they got a design life of 25 years, you build a new one, you got 50 years. So those I think those are why we can get an exemption from these because of the size of the lots. And then to bring that into the sewer service area, you got to remember that our capital cost is based on equalized value. So if you got a $800,000 home on a 5 acre lot, that equalized value is going to probably be tipping up close to $1 million or a little bit over $1 million. And that's going to have to be borne by the utility and the capital cost and planning cost. You know, and it's not a ton of money, but yet aggregately, it's going to accumulate rather quickly when you're talking about subdivisions of that nature.
Makes sense.
last point I think Matt should make is that it wasn't just adding to the sewer area, you also took some out, which is kind of hard to see.
Yeah, and I thought that's what you were asking earlier, but we could talk about that too, Tim. And yeah, if you want to talk about the history behind why we're removing these two areas.
This piece here, almost all of that land north of Freistadt Road is currently owned by the MMSD or the village through the Green Seams program. So that's never going to revert back into any kind of a residential or commercial development. It was bought with stewardship fund money. The other one we're exempting over here is basically the Mount Brook subdivision. But there's really no feasible way to get a gravity system to work there, so it'd be very costly to install a lift station to serve one, rather large subdivision, but there again, 40 homes. It just doesn't make sense to keep it in there. This red box we're adding is Friedenfeld Park. You recall a couple of years ago, we ran the sanitary down Country Air Drive to serve Friedenfeld Park because they want to put in a concession stand and a bathroom. Then this piece here, the whole property on Hilltop, that is designed to serve off of a Penn sewer on Hilltop Drive that was put in probably 15 years ago.
I think it's good that there's some areas that we've eliminated because it puts a lot of thought into this. And it's not just about let's keep expanding. There is a rationale or a means to our madness. And as you can see, some of these areas were actually backed out because it didn't meet our criteria. So I think that's good from a public perspective of what you did.
Yeah, I think we wanted to be careful with this and not go crazy just adding for the sake of adding, but adding where we felt it was appropriate and met the criteria. And then, yeah, there's a few cases here where it doesn't make sense. We can remove.
Just one question.
Rick?
Yeah, when I was on utility advisory, well over a year ago now, I think we looked at a preliminary map and there was a little bit of a discussion to expand that small area by 175. So south of 175, east of Highway Y. And I don't know, so somebody on the advisory committee was asking about that parcel as well and said it might be difficult to service. So was there any discussion, Bob, at your last meeting about that area? Not that area at all. Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe we did in the utility advisory committee meeting. Maybe that's just because it wasn't included, but we did talk about it at a staff level. And if I remember right, Tim, you probably he's got all the history. But I believe it was just a matter of who owns the properties and the likelihood of development, and those two factors kind of just taking it out of the equation for now.
So those two parcels by Highway 175 and Y, those are those commercial areas on the corners.
Yeah.
Where the Moose Lodge is and the old German gift
Yeah.
place used to be. And then across the street is that Swing Time Golf. So that's why those were included, because it just makes sense that if sewer ever expands out to Lannon Road and the Schuster property, which is across from the Willow Creek Business Park, when they decide that they want to sell, then it makes sense to have that in because it opens up a greater area of service for the utility. And if you got to put in a lift station, it's better to have that in your planning area because you try to build lift stations once.
Other comments, committee?
Do we need action?
Do you need us to do anything with this or just for discussion only at this point?
I mean, it's mainly for discussion. If you're supportive of us sending this to the DNR for preliminary review, I think that was the main action. So it sounds like that's the case and we'll plan on doing that. And there aren't any other major adjustments from what I'm hearing.
Then it comes back to us for a final approval at some point?
Yeah,
or-
we would probably come back with,
Yeah.
with the map as it stands after that DNR review. And then take it to Public Works and Village Board as well for, approval.
I personally would feel more comfortable to have a motion to move this on for DNR review because things like this get tracked back. How did that happen? How did that happen? And let's leave a trail of how things happened, okay?
Okay.
So I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the sanitary service area as presented by the Director of Public Works at our meeting tonight with the direction to move it forward to the, is it sewer pack
DNR.
or the DNR?
Wow.
Sewer PAC would
The
send it
reviewing,
to DNR, on our behalf.
the reviewing agency, yes, on our behalf.
I like that, reviewing agencies.
Yeah.
You have a second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion?
Just a quick question. So does this have a formal public process per law that the public has, after this has been, we've addressed the comments, if any, from the reviewing agency, this is it. Does the public say, okay, now we get a kick at it?
No, I believe the sewer pack plan as well as the DNR both offer opportunities for public feedback and comment.
And is it through their entity, through their websites, or they're holding meetings, or is it?
That I don't know the process
Okay,
well enough to answer
just
that.
wondering what's on the horizon for us. Okay, thank you.
So all of that being said, do we, it doesn't say that we're voting on this tonight. Do we want to give the public a chance to come before we take the vote in case?
It's not final. We have to wait to see if DNR even approves this.
Yeah, because
Yeah, they'd be,
the map could change if the DNR just says absolutely not to this Isabel Farms area and you have to retool something. If
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. Will the public get a chance? Because we have to approve this.
Yeah,
We have-
it'll come back to
I'm-
committee
yeah.
and back to village board.
I'm good. Yep. Thank you.
The sewer pack requires a public hearing. So those can occur the same evening as a village board meeting to adopt the sanitary sewer service area for recommendation to the sewer pack and then ultimately to the DNR. Because how I look at it is it's like a ratification process where initially the municipality needs to approve it, then it goes to the sewer pack, and then back to the municipality after the DNR approved it for adoption. So that's the process, and there is a public hearing required by sewer pack when the sewer service area that's being amended is proposed. So that's all part of the process.
Then I'm fine.
okay. Any more questions or comments? We'll vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Rick. Moving on to F, 2024 labor and equipment rates.
All right, this is an annual update and it's coming just a little bit later than typical, and that's just me getting the new processes under my belt, but we are updating our equipment and labor rates that could potentially be charged back out to developers or anybody that would use our services. The equipment rates, there aren't any major changes there. With the labor rates, the biggest changes are probably in public works staff, just based on the salaries of the village engineer and myself, as well as superintendents. They all had raises last year that impacted the rates. So those are the biggest changes. I think in the item that got attached for equipment, for some reason, when it was attached, it cut off the 2023 and 2024 data. So I provided that as a hard copy for you to look at.
Was there a percentage increase on the equipment? Or it looks like it's pretty small.
Yeah, equipment was a 3%.
Okay, and that's the norm.
That's what had been done, yeah, for a number of years.
Ready?
I've seen this for years, these increases. When do we loan out our equipment to developers or whomever? When does that occur?
It's not loaning out so much as doing work that could potentially be charged back, like inspections or something like that, that we're doing in developments. There are instances, and honestly, there's probably more opportunity to do that than we're taking advantage of. And that's something that Kevin and I have talked about. Scott's raising his hand there. He might have something.
Sign that down.
I was just trying to think of a situation where we would have a village backhoe doing work for and getting paid by a developer, and I don't know when.
Yeah, I mean, for the developer, like the labor rates are probably more applicable because Staff could be working on agreements and that sort of thing.
I could
and those
see, you guys are reviewing something.
Exactly.
Yeah, that I get.
plan review.
I guess the question was more directed towards our equipment. And it's rare if at all, it sounds like.
Yeah, except for the things that Scott mentioned, those more like operational things. So if somebody knocks down a traffic light or
Oh,
a
sure.
village tree or something like that, we
Sure.
come up with a cost associated with the damage and bill it back to them or their insurance.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah, okay.
Or the tar kettle, when you might want to bring out the tar kettle. That's my favorite one.
Still do it the old way.
Stump grinder would be in demand.
Oh, yeah.
Committee, do we have a motion?
I'm thinking about the calculation for a second, please.
Or you can still have a motion, you can still discuss.
Make a motion to approve the labor and equipment rates as presented.
For 2024.
Yes.
Okay. I second that.
Bill?
So it's the actual, I get the base wage. That's not the issue.
Yeah, for
The
labor, it's,
benefits, Fed, state, pension, insurance, and social security from payroll. So we're including both sides of the social security contribution, right? Am I understanding this correctly?
I guess, not completely avoiding your question, but it's a fully loaded rate that factors in the cost of benefits as well. I don't think there's like a.
Plus 15%.
Yeah, the 15% is just an additional administrative.
Yeah, I get
fee
it.
That the
Yep,
village
yep,
has
yep,
charged
yep.
for, going back years, I guess, and we're just continuing that forward.
I think I'm okay.
You're good, Phil?
I think so, yeah. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. And now my favorite topic, moving on to the report on the project at Maple and Lannon Road in the Department of Transportation.
Okay, so I'll try to walk through this one and then address any questions that you might have. But this project goes back a couple of years. The village first entered into an agreement with WISDOT back in November of 21 for a project at Maple and Lannon with a 90-10 split. At that time, the agreement, and these agreements are all attached to the item as well, so you can take a look at them if you haven't already. That project was almost $809,000. And in line with the 90-10 split, the village share was about $81,798. At that time, the village allocated $80,000 out of ARPA funding to fund the project as it stood at that time. There was a revision to the agreement that was done in May of 23, so just about a year ago. And at that time, the project estimate had changed from the 808 or 809,000 to 1.1 million. And I think there are a couple of factors in there. It's a little bit hard to identify what exactly was going on there. I believe the village added some scope, and I'm thinking it's more in like the traffic signals that didn't qualify for the 90-10 split. So we took on a greater share of some of that additional scope. And then this was also a highly inflationary time period. So I'm assuming they made an adjustment for inflation as well. In that May 23 agreement, there is a cap put in place for the federal participation on the project of $744,032. And because of that, with the bid, with the estimate being 1.1, just a little over 1.1 million, anything above and beyond that estimate was going to be at the village's cost because the federal government had capped out. So the bid for the project was occurred this spring, early this spring, and it came back as 1.3. So a couple $100,000 over the estimate that was done last year at that time. The actual difference was $180,341. That's about a 16% increase. When you look at what went into that 1.3 million, the construction component was actually pretty well on target with the estimate. The biggest portion of the increase from the 1.1 to the 1.3-ish were increased inspection fees from WISDOT. So I talked to them and they indicated that they were going through a change with inspection and they had a new contract and the costs were higher across the board. And this was something that they were having to do in communities all over the place, was pass these new higher inspection costs through. So there is one of the questions that came up when we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago is like, is there a threshold where if it's a certain percentage over that they flag that and they talk to the municipality about it before they award it. And there is a threshold. There's a 5% over or a 10% under threshold, but they're not looking at their cost. They're only looking at the construction cost. So when the increase was for WISDOT inspection fees, it didn't trip their 5% threshold. So that left us responsible for, again, the difference from 1.1 to 1.3, because this has been awarded by WISDOT. And, kind of backing into the math, when you have the 1.3, you subtract out the 744,000 that the federal government, the 80,000 that we had budgeted out of ARPA, that leaves us with a difference of almost $500,000, 489,000 and change that we needed to cover. So that's how we arrived at the $500,000 amount that was being discussed at a couple committees a few weeks ago. I did, as I mentioned, have some follow-up conversations with WISDOT about it, just to answer some of the questions that came out of committee. A payment plan was one thing that was discussed. They don't offer that. This is a state jurisdiction, so we can't perform the work ourselves. Another thing that was discussed. And if we were to back out of this, and the timing would be really difficult right now because it's so close to actually beginning in construction, we would incur whatever costs there would be associated with defaulting on the contract essentially. So that's kind of the quick explanation. And then since then, the board has also approved the borrowing that would essentially cover the difference here. So the village is proceeding with that $500,000 additional borrowing to cover what was missed here.
Good update. Any questions? Rick?
Yeah, I went back and watched both videos from the Public Works meeting last year and also the village board where the $290,000 got approved. And I'm embarrassed a little bit because none of us on the board remembered that. And all of a sudden we're throwing around $500,000. Well, it actually wasn't, because 290,000 of that was already approved in June of last year, final approval. So with that said, that was supposed to come out of ARPA funds. That's what was stated then. And now the ARPA funds are gone.
Yeah, I didn't mention that in my update, but that's accurate. At the time this agreement was discussed, the revised May 23 agreement, the director of public works was asked, well, how will you make up this difference? And part of the conversation at that time was that it would be covered by ARPA. But yes, since then, with his retirement, I think that got lost in the mix somehow. And
I think it became racquetball courts.
well, and yeah, the ARPA funds have now gone to various other projects.
Right.
Some of which are committed in terms of like a contract in place, and others that are working towards that.
Mhm. It's all pretty.
The other discussion at the time was to use some of the transfer, the road transfer money from Fresh Start Road and what was left at Goldendale. I don't like doing that. I think we did it at Goldendale for some portion of it. But, you know, those monies are really meant for redeveloping those roads when they're necessary. So I
Yeah.
guess we're stuck with the borrowing here. It does explain a lot. We're still an additional $200,000 over what was approved last year. But
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning that, you know, there could be a change order on the contract. There could be additional inspection fees, that could increase the amount that we owe. I've been reassured by WISDOT that they have a good project manager on the job and that he's able to deliver projects efficiently. But at the same time, they can't promise, that there won't be increases.
Wow. Bob, you have anything? Bill?
No, I do.
Go ahead.
You understand you are just the messenger, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So part of the reason I wanted this on the agenda, I was hoping the village board could hear this, but I wanted to get the DOT here and see them squirm, to be honest with you. To see the pain that we go through here, how, I know how it works there, you know, they trivialize these costs and it's not out of their pocket technically, but the impact on locals is quite significant here. What department were you talking to there? And I'm talking about all of this. I know nothing's going to change on this, but maybe just a little more education on who we're dealing with in the future and that.
Well, and I don't remember like specific department names, but there's 3 or 4 different groups
Yeah.
Involved in the development, the bid, the award,
Yep.
and now the construction of the project. So you can't really just talk to one individual. And that's another problem with identifying somebody to
Yeah,
come
but
here.
usually there's a money person, you know, who could explain to you how the contract was split out, you know, like their planning group or their.
Yeah. And I did talk to, to that person. They're the ones that, you know, that provided the information about the thresholds, the 5% and the over
Okay.
10% under, and how, you know, technically we didn't trip those thresholds. And I did express your concern to them about the difficulties local communities have with absorbing this kind of cost. And, you know, they seemed sympathetic, but at the same time, you know, they're not volunteering for participation either.
I've seen increases all my career, you know, there's reasons for it. I understand it, inflation, you know, the whole 9 yards and that, but never have I seen an increase like this. And when they try to hang their hat on and blame it on the inspection services, now that really is pretty weak in my mind. First question is is it DOT personnel inspecting or is it a consultant that they hired to do the inspection?
No, my understanding is that it's a consultant that's doing work for the DOT and that they have a new contract in place with higher rates.
Yeah, but to get this much higher is crazy. Did they give you a name of this magical project manager that's going to ensure that this project comes in under budget?
They did. I have the name and I've exchanged a couple emails with
How
them.
this goes. I'd be interested in to see if I know them. Yeah, for those costs, yeah, okay, 3%. DOT has been the tightest agency that I've ever had to negotiate with, ever. I'm sure you've been there too. And they really control those costs and those increases in that. So this increase of 500 some $1,000 is not attributed just to this increase in inspection costs. No way. Jose.
Yeah, the inspection cost is some portion of the 180. Part of what I wanted to outline was that $500,000, like there's a portion that the village didn't adjust to as well. Like, you know, when it was brought to the village with this May 23 agreement, we knew that the costs were going to go up from 808,000 to 1.1. And we didn't modify our budget at that point. So that was more than half of the increase right there. Then the increase from May 23 to the bid, where you have the bid for the construction and the WISDOT inspection services, that's another increase. And a portion of that, the biggest portion of that $180,000 is an increase in inspection fees.
I raise a good point too. There could be some items that DOT won't pay for. Could be some signals. If we ask for a unique light, street light, they're not going to participate in things like that. I don't know if there's any utilities that are compensable on this job, which means we'd be shelling that out too. But anyway, here we are.
Yep.
So I feel better now. Thank you.
Here we are sums it up.
Yeah.
So that's information only, so we will move on to the director's report. Anything you want to highlight, Matt?
Just a couple things. Let me pull it up here. This actually. So I just highlighted in green a few things that I wanted to talk about. And then at the end, you're free to ask questions about anything up here. But I wanted to highlight some of the work that's going on at Well 12. If you remember, we got approval for some additional cleaning and rehab work that's needed on Well 12 before we can proceed with construction of the well house and bringing that well online. That is underway as we speak in the last 3 or so days, or actually going into last week, so a little more than that. They completed the mechanical cleaning of the well, which produced very good results, very positive results, to the point where they're thinking that the scope of that $30,000 that you approved for mechanical cleaning and then scoping for chemical rehab, we'll still need that, but the actual cost of the chemical rehab, because the mechanical cleaning went so well, may actually be lower or even non-existent, depending on how the testing goes. We'll have results from the testing in the next couple of days here. So that is actually a positive thing, and if we can turn that around and begin the construction, we would really have only lost a couple weeks, and I think that would be good. So that's positive. I did want to, so going down on the report under compliance, I have a line highlighted here, PSC CPR report development. We submitted the CPR continuing property record. This is a report that the village has owed the PSC for a number of years since the rate case was done, I think back in 2001. When Kevin and I got here, we worked on that report, and based on an example that was provided, submitted a version of the report to them a couple months ago, and we're just kind of awaiting feedback. We got the feedback that we didn't do it right. So there's a little more work to be done, but the positive news is that we're working cooperatively with them, and we've got a couple people at the PSC that are engaged to kind of help us through the process of getting this report established. So I think we're headed in the right direction there. And that's, again, something that's been kind of hanging out there for a couple of years, where we've been getting pinged by the PSC every so often about where's this report, where's the progress. I think in the next month or two here, we'll be able to put that one to bed. Okay, moving down into the department update, I wanted to talk about some vacancies. We are trying to fill vacancies in the engineering division. I believe we're making progress towards engineering tech, and hopefully by the next meeting, we'll be able to report on a hire there. Fingers crossed on that one, because we're sorely in need of some additional help. And then I believe we're going to be pivoting from the land surveyor position, which has had really zero traction on the job market, to more of an entry-level civil engineer position. So I'm looking to get that posted in the next week or two here and see if we can have some better luck that way. But both with the engineering tech and with the civil engineer, we're open to hiring the right person at more of an entry level, hopes of being able to train them up versus drawing somebody with significant experience out of the private sector or another municipality, which I think is probably unlikely. So that's the engineering staffing. The other staffing that I want to mention is what we talked about earlier before the meeting started, but this will be Deb's last meeting with us. She's dumping us. She's transferring to the planning department effective today, actually, officially, but she's going to kind of have double duty. So I wanted to thank her on behalf of the village and of the Public Works Department for her hard work in Public Works over the last couple of years. I know all the guys have appreciated the work that she's done, and there'll be big shoes to fill. So,
Yeah. Thank you, Deb. Seriously. You've been awesome. Thank you.
um,
And we know where you are. Just
Just the call.
Yeah.
and now that we've turned the page on Deb, we do have somebody.
She's gone.
We do have somebody that's accepted an offer for her position and is starting in about 10 days or so, not next Monday, but the following. And she's got a lot of good experience that is very relatable to the position. So her name is Linda, and we're looking forward to getting her started. Interstate Saw, where she's doing a lot of similar administrative work, kind of on the opposite end. She's working for a contractor now, but she's got some other experience that I think is helpful. She has served as an appointed member of the Plan Commission and the Public Works Board for the Village of Jackson, each of those for about 5 years. So she's got some good experience when it comes to government. And she's also been the president of an HOA. So she's used to interacting with people in kind of a similar nature that we do in government.
Good.
And then the last two items in the department update that I wanted to mention is 2 rate increases. So another item that was at the Utility Advisory Committee was a recommendation for sewer rate increases on like a consistent every other year basis of about 4% starting this year. So you'll see probably next meeting a resolution before you that reflects the implementation of the first year of that sewer rate increase. And then at the same time,
on that is that we agreed that every other year we're kind of gut check where we're at with that.
yeah, exactly. We committed to the first year of a rate increase and then to evaluate, every other year to make sure that the 4% is still needed. Maybe that could be reduced a little bit. Maybe it would need to increase based on some unexpected costs. So that's how I saw it was, we're committing to 1 year and then an every other year evaluation. Also at the utility advisory, it was more of just a discussion item because the ship has sailed on this one, but we're nearing the point where our step 2 rates for water will be implemented. According to the PSC order document, the water rate increase can go into effect once the Goldendale Booster Station is online and once Tower 4 is online. So both of those coming online. The booster station, we're expecting that to be online this summer, and then the tower in the fall. And in talking to Steve, what he's suggesting is that kind of the quarter following them coming online is when we would see those rates go up. And I think it says well, you don't have the write-up because this is just my report, but the write-up at the Utility Advisory Committee, and this is information just taken right from the PSC report, is that would on average be about a 9% increase for folks, average user. But the other thing to point out with the water step 2 rate is that even with those rates, we still fall kind of middle of the pack with rates for surrounding communities. So nevertheless, it is a 9% increase on average, which is something that folks will notice for sure. And combine that with the sewer rate. Those are two things that we'll be dealing with here. Last thing on the report, looking at the complaint log, it was a very wet month. So there were a lot of calls about flooding or drainage issues, and the engineering department in particular has been very busy investigating those and doing what we can to respond. But that's taken a lot of staff time to sort through that stuff. So that is it for the report. Actually, one other thing, I gave you a copy of the service request policy. I mentioned it last time that we were working on it. We kind of have that finalized, and I've got that basically in place now. So the handout that I gave you is just a copy of it, and feel free to look through that. But it's essentially just a way to kind of track, what are the issues that are coming forward. It's all kind of being recorded in the same place this complaint log is. But then we're kind of tracking how long has it been an issue, who's responsible for following up with it. And then we're also just trying to close the loop on stuff too. So if we come to a determination about whatever the issue is that somebody brought forward, if it's something that needs investigation, we're giving them a determination on it and then kind of calling it final and documenting that. So future staff, when they look into an issue, can go back and see a record on a property and understand what, has transpired in the past. So I think it's a good customer service thing. It's also a good tool for staff to use as a historical reference.
I love this log.
Yeah, it's good.
Can you explain to me the difference between engineering drainage and street drainage?
Yeah, I think, we're still in the process of kind of refining how this goes. So maybe Deb could answer that question the best, because she's the one that categorized them. How I would envision it is street flooding would be like maybe there's a blocked inlet and, we're flooding on an intersection or something like that. Drainage is more of a property issue that,
Capacity issue in the swales or detention.
or my yard is wet and, there's a long history of, the swale or the culvert or whatever the case might be, but the infrastructure not working as it's intended, that requires some staff time to investigate.
So your service request and complaint handling policy, is there like a goal where you identify maybe reoccurring complaints and you really try to address those and try to minimize them or eliminate them? Is it proactive in that regard?
Well, I'd like for us not to be spending a lot of time on issues that have been previously discussed and vetted.
Sure.
And that's something that I've noticed in my first 4 or so months happens on a somewhat regular basis, that we're spending a lot of time circling back to things that happened, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago, where if we had some appropriate documentation that said, well, this was the determination at that time, our question to somebody bringing the issue back could be, well, has anything changed? And if something hasn't changed, then the determination would essentially be the same. But yeah, I think ultimately the goal is to be as responsive as possible too. And it outlines kind of some standards for how we would respond and in what amount of time based on the severity of something.
That's great. Thanks.
Yep, thank you for the report, Matt. Next meeting date would be June already. June 5th would be the Wednesday. Does that work for everyone? 5:30? Pardon? Is that good?
Should be fine.
Okay. Then that's what it'll be, 5:30 PM on June 5th. And any other announcements? I don't think so. And so we will adjourn this meeting at 7 o'clock. Thank you, everyone.